Hi everybody, we do apologise for a break in transmission. We found that Facebook didn't like us for some reason, but we're now able to produce this through YouTube, which we will be sending. Once we finish this, we'll be copying it over to Facebook so that those people, our Facebook members, can have a look at it and pass their comments. So the reason for tonight is that I have with me Corey Allen, who's from the Australian Progressive Party, and we're going to talk about the proposed legislation that will limit activity in terms of the number of members and so forth that we need in order to register as a political party here in Australia. So this is an important conversation because it really is about the way the government will use whatever means they can in order to minimise the voice or exclude the voice of minor parties. Now, when we're saying we're excluding those voices, this is you. The government is preventing you from having a voice about the primary issues that matter to you, particularly in relation to the Child Protection Party, and particularly in relation to the voices of children, so that we can improve their outcomes. But I'd just like to welcome my two guests, which is Avery, as you will all know, and Corey as well. So, hi guys, good to see you. Glad we finally got this working, even if it happened to be just on YouTube.
Yep. Good evening to Tony and Corey.
Yes, lovely to be here. Good to chat.
Yeah, sorry about it's such a mess, man. And it just was Facebook, funnily enough, so I don't know what the reasons were for that. But you're probably a younger bloke, Corey. You're probably more technically clued up than I am around all of this stuff. But I'm just wondering whether you, Corey, could kick off with tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe, and about your party and where this legislation fits and your particular concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Corey Allen. I'm the Vice President of the Australian Progressives. We're a minor party that is registered federally under the current legislation. We're also registered, we have a branch in the ACT where we contested the 2020 territory election. And as of that election, we are the fourth largest political party in Canberra. So in terms of this bill in particular. So the bill that we're here to chat about tonight is the Electoral Legislation Reform Party Registration Integrity Bill, and we're just calling it the Party Pooper over at the Progressives for short. So I mean, the bill is partially the result of a joint select committee into Electoral Matters committee, and also the result of the Liberal Party's need to pass some reforms for their own brand. So there are two main aspects to this bill, and there are about three other electoral reform bills that are being moved at the same time. Those all mostly relate to things like lowering disclosure thresholds for when you become regarded as a political campaigner, and also the other ones are things like changing the timeline for pre-poll and postal voting and things like that. But this bill in particular is quite a challenge because of two main issues. The first one is the one that affects all of us, which is that it triples the membership requirement for political parties. So under the current legislation, you are eligible to register a political party if you have 500 members. Under the proposed legislation, that number is increased by 200% up to 1,500. Now, you know, some in the community think that, okay, maybe this is all right. It stops some of the, you know, smaller parties that don't really stand for anything from registering. You know, that's a policy disagreement. The other issue that this bill raises is it locks up certain terms to be used in what you're allowed to call your party. So the key here is obviously the Liberal Party wants to lock up the term liberal. They don't want any other alternative Liberal parties that running around. They don't want the Liberal Democrats to keep being called the Liberal Democrats. They don't want the New Liberals to be able to be called the New Liberals.
So can I just ask, Corey, do you think that this legislation has come about because of the formation of the New Liberal Party?
I think that it played a part. I think that the much bigger catalyst was the pre-selection of Campbell Newman as the Liberal Democrats' lead Senate candidate in Queensland.
Yeah.
The Senate contest in Queensland was always going to be hard for the Liberals this time because Pauline Hanson is on the ticket. She's up for re-election this year. Add in a former Liberal premier, and all of a sudden you've got a bit of a recipe for the Liberals to only get 2 senators re-elected in Queensland. So that's definitely, I think that the New Liberals and Victor Klein have obviously started eating away at the Liberals in some of their more socially liberal electorates. But I think unless Victor's able to beat the Liberals on primary vote, a lot of the people who are voting for him are probably going to preference the Liberals anyway, regardless of what the party recommends. So the bill has it's in the House of Reps at the moment, so it's not been passed yet. Unfortunately, today the Labor Party at their caucus meeting announced that they would be supporting the legislation. So unfortunately, this bill now has bipartisan support, and is, unless Labor changes their mind overnight, or unless the coalition chooses to withdraw the bill for whatever reason, which is highly unlikely, the bill's probably going to pass both houses, probably end of the week or early in the next sitting.
Can you talk a little bit about, Corey, the implications for us too, for you and for us? Because I was reading through something about it earlier, and the amendment also seeks to minimise the risk that a voter may be confused. I like this bit. Confused or potentially misled in the exercise of their choice at an election due to a political parties being registered with very similar names. Now, we'd known that the AEC excludes people where the names are the same, and with their logos. We had that problem too, Avery, didn't we, initially?
We did.
With the logos. So it's not like... They're a bit anal about all of that too, the bastards. So what do you think's happening here where they're talking about... that poor old Australians will be confused with the names?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this feeds back to the discussion we just had about the Liberal Democrats and the New Liberals, and Victor Klein, for example, in the New Liberals, is very explicit in what he says. He says, no, we 100% intend people to look at us, see the word liberal, and he wants people to think, what is a liberal? At the same time, the Liberal Democrats, their thing is exactly the same. They want people to look at their name, see liberal, and go, what is a liberal?
But he's saying, I wonder whether there's some confusion there about
So
the big L or the little L, that sort of stuff.
So that's a huge part of it, and You've got to look at electoral history to have a little bit of an understanding there. So there are 3 main points to look at for that. First of all is David Leyonhjelm's election as Senator for New South Wales at the 2013 election. He won that seat primarily off the back of they have the name Liberal Democrats. It's very similar to Liberal, and they appeared to the left of the Liberals on the Senate ballot paper. So people, wanting to vote Liberal in 2013 election, the Liberals formed government, so obviously quite a number of people wanted to vote Liberal. They looked across, they saw Liberal Democrat, and they voted for it. A number of those voters were probably looking to actually vote for, the Liberal Party, the coalition, the government. But ended up voting for this party because they were, and we do know from both from our experience in trying to seek election, and also from all the academic evidence that Australians aren't 100% sure how the political system works on a lot of issues, And the Senate is always a huge bone of contention. There's lots of confusion about how voting in the Senate works. So that's the first one, is Senator Landhill. The second one is there was the minor party Flux, who are a party that advocate for online direct democracy through sort of a blockchain technology. It's all very technical and a little bit beyond me, to be honest. They changed their name in the lead up to the last Western Australian election. They changed their name from Flux to Liberals for Climate, which was obviously an attempt to confuse people who were looking to vote Liberal into voting for a party called Liberals for Climate. There have been other iterations of that in the past. Obviously, when the Labor Party split in the 50s, the new offshoot party called itself the Democratic Labor Party. And they still exist in some form today. They've been in and out of registration over the last couple of years, but they still exist. And the Democratic Labor Party, because of their strong anti-communist stance and their concerns about communism in the ALP in the 50s, ended up directing preferences towards the Liberals, and that's a huge part of why Menzies stayed in government for so long. There are lots of historical examples of parties that have chosen to adopt a name for completely legitimate reasons. The Democratic Labor Party was an offshoot of the Australian Labor Party, whose primary issue was, we're a party of trade unions and we believe in democracy, not communism. Whether or not you agree with them is irrelevant. They were the Democratic Labor Party. In the case of, I think it is in South Australia, there was the Liberal movement was an offshoot party that sought to shift South Australian politics in a more liberal direction rather than a conservative direction. And they ended up, I think all of their members ended up rejoining the Liberal Party as sort of a mission accomplished deal. I think
the other issue around some of those parties too is that they do become offshoots from other parties though, Corey. And whereas we're not, you're not. We have particular.
The naming changes are one area of this bill, and that's what they're trying to talk about when they talk about confusion and when talking about making sure Australians know who they're voting for. Okay, that's fine. We might not agree on whether or not this is the right method to do that. As you said, the AEC has some pretty rigorous standards that you have to pass. You can't have a logo that's too similar. You can't have a name that's directly. We couldn't go and call ourselves the Australian Labor Party Progressive Branch. That'd be absurd.
Well, it would be. I tell you what, that would be absurd because the Labor Party's not progressive in any way. I reckon. So,
absolutely. I think the Labor Party have definitely lost.
They're a disappointment, man. We could have a conversation about that forever. They're a great disappointment.
Sign me up for that one day.
Yeah. Okay, we will.
The other aspect of this bill, of course, is the 1,500 members, tripling the membership threshold. And there are a few issues with this in general. The first one is 1,500 is it doesn't sound like a lot in a country of 25 million or 15 million eligible voters, but in its context, it is quite difficult to get 1,500 people in a system with quite low political engagement to agree to a set of values and stick to it. Now, where the progressives as a party have a little under 1,300 members at the moment, so we're most of the way there, and we'll probably be able to get across the 1,500 line before the bill actually kicks in. But there are a lot of parties that aren't going to get there. It's a disappointing and honest fact. A lot of political parties are not going to be able to meet this threshold for a few reasons. First of all, the pandemic is ongoing. If you're in a minor party that's primarily based out of Sydney or Melbourne, which is most of them, you know, if you're based out of Sydney or Melbourne, you're not going to be out in the streets trying to talk to people and convince them to join your political party. You know, we're in a lockdown right now. We can't do that. That's, you know, it's not allowed, let alone advisable. The second aspect is that, you know, they're doing it. A federal election could be called any day now. You know, the Prime Minister is perfectly within his rights to go to the lodge tonight if he wanted to. Now, obviously, the election's not going to happen immediately. There's going to be a little bit of leeway before the election. You know, I think it'd be quite silly to assume an election before November, and I'm personally banking on it being next year. But you know, they're calling it very late in the elections. They're making this change very late in the election cycle. A lot of political parties, including the Progressives. Sorry, I've just got to move my cat, everyone.
I was just while you're moving your cat,
Yes.
mate. Thank
Sorry
God
about that.
thank God it wasn't a dog. That might have disrupted lots of things. I guess one of the primary issues is I'm wondering about how this is therefore going to impact you, because it only impacts those of us who are applying for federal registration and wish to have candidates particularly above the line too, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you think this impacts your party? And then perhaps Avery can tell us about how it impacts ours.
Yeah, so I mean, just in broad strokes on that, you know, the change is that, you know, every currently registered minor party that doesn't have a seat in either the House of Representatives or the Senate now has to make sure that they have 1,500 members who, if the Electoral Commission called and asked, "Are you a member of this party?" are going to answer the phone and say, "Yes, I'm a member of this party." Oh, he's back again. You need to move. So that's you know, in general terms, that's what it does. What it means for the Progressives and where I'm sitting is we have to now divert a lot of our volunteer energy, a lot of our resources into membership recruitment and, you know, membership retention and, you know, all of the things that we've already done the work for, and we've already passed an audit with the Electoral Commission that says, yeah, you've got the members, you're able to remain registered. You know, we went through this less than 6 months ago. And so, you know, we now don't have the ability to have all of those resources that we've been building up for our federal election campaign. We don't get to use those resources, you know, selling our values and our vision to, you know, the people in Canberra or the people in Sydney or the people in Adelaide. You know, we have to use those resources instead to convincing people to make what is quite a firm commitment. Joining a political party is not something that, you know, anyone just does for the sake of it. You've got to really believe in the values of a party to be a member.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, it's a resource drain. It's a logistical drain because you've got to make sure that all of those 1,500 members, you know, are going to stay members of your party over, you know, a 3-year period between audits. You've got to make sure that you've got all the correct details for them, that you've got to be able to match them to the electoral roll. You know, you've got to be able to, you know, rapidly roll out communications to them and say, hey, look, you know, the AEC is going to ask this question. We need you to be ready. So, you know, there are thousands and thousands of people across all the minor political parties are going to have to do this.
Yeah. I just wondering, just on that issue though, whether Avery, you could make some comment, I guess, about how that's impacted us because we lost registration. Because of all those issues that you just mentioned, the difficulty in maintaining that interest. We'd had members that had been members for 6 years or so, and so on. Avery, would you want to comment about that for a moment, and just some of those things that Corey's talked about?
Yeah, we found it really difficult to get 500 people. I mean, we've got 1,350 or so members nationwide. We had a real problem getting just 500 of them to say, yes, we support the Child Protection Party. We actually failed by 1 point. We were allowed 9 rejections, we got 10. Or we were allowed 10, we got 11, and so we just, when we thought about it, we were given the opportunity to appeal, but when we thought about it, child protection legislation is not a federal issue; it's a state issue. So we thought, should we be devoting our resources to re-registering as a federal party or not? And we decided not. My concern about this legislation is that if it does get passed at the federal level, I can see the state governments doing exactly the same thing for exactly the same reasons, pushing the minor parties out, and that will kill the minor parties in the states as well.
So it's really interesting. If I can just cut in there, it's really interesting that you say that, because that exact same thing did happen in Queensland in the lead up to their most recent election. It might have been the cycle before that, but it was in the lead up to an election. Their threshold was 200, and they raised it to 500. And basically, every minor party in Queensland, except for I think it was the Animal Justice Party and the Liberal Democrats, and obviously, One Nation were parliamentary at the time, so they were fine, and Palmer's mostly based up there, so they were fine. So other than, Palmer, One Nation, Animal Justice, and the parties that were already in Parliament, all the minor parties in Queensland got wiped out overnight. So yeah, absolutely. It's a very real concern about shifting the goalposts across the country. In New South Wales, we have 750 is our requirement threshold to register as a state-based party. And it's actually one of the justifications that the government's given for raising the federal threshold is, well, the federal threshold is lower than the New South Wales threshold, and that doesn't make much sense. But when you consider that the New South Wales threshold not only is 750 members, but in New South Wales, you have to get every single one of them to sign a paper document that says that you're a member of the party. All of those have to be submitted to the Electoral Commission. All of them have to be accurate and up to date. New South Wales is a logistical nightmare to register a political party. Yeah.
Declarations signed, the paper declarations. We had exactly the same issue here in SA a couple of years, 3 years ago. I had a bit of a discussion with them, and we still got to do it, but we do it electronically now. So you might want to think about that.
Yeah. So we're friends with the Keep Sydney Open Party, who are a party mostly interested in the nighttime economy. We had some really serious lockdown laws in Sydney recently, where basically pubs and stuff would be shut at 3 a.m. And they weren't allowed to admit new patrons after 1:30. So anyway, Keep Sydney Open was a party that was set up to combat that issue and other challenges to nightlife and youth culture and things like that. They raised that question as part of their registration process. And in New South Wales, it's very firm. You can't do it electronically. You have to have signed paper documents. So the registration process is very, very difficult at that level. And then obviously, federally, we're allowed to, we're asked to submit a spreadsheet. We're asked to do it electronically, make it as easy as possible for the AEC to do the data matching. With the New South Wales Electoral Commission, to do anything sort of digitized, they'd have to scan it all in and match it all up using that. Then you've got issues of, data mismatch because not everyone's handwriting is perfect, and just struggles great.
So what are the? So you are saying though, and I don't disagree with this, that it's like a fait accompli, really, that there's not much that we could do, but is there anything though, Corey, that we possibly could do to change? Because at the end of the day, people are going to have to vote on it. Yeah. And I guess if both sides of the political spectrum primarily are going to agree to it, then there's nothing that you and I can do about it. But there is the Senate. Yeah. And the Senate's a bit more vulnerable than the House of Reps, given they have so many independents and Greens and others. Do you know what the Greens are saying or thinking, or the Lambies of this world?
We're actually in a really good position in the Senate, except for the fact that the government and Labor together have a majority. So if they agree, it'll pass. On the crossbench, the Greens are against this bill. Lambie is against this bill. Senator Patrick is against this bill. The only crossbench senators who haven't publicly declared a position, as far as I'm aware, Sterling Griff, and the One Nation senators. Now, okay, let's assume that the One Nation senators are going to vote with the government on this anyway. Senator Griff could have been in quite a powerful position if Labor had decided to oppose this. Senator Griff could basically held this bill in his hand. And obviously, Labor have taken it away and said, no, we're just going to let it through anyway because we don't particularly care, which is really, really disappointing. And I'm a former member of the Labor Party, and I'm absolutely gutted about their decision to just abandon democracy in such a way. But it's in terms of what we can do on this. So obviously, if we can keep trying until it passes the Senate. If enough people across Australia were to tell Labor, no, don't do this. This is a bad idea. If enough people, particularly in marginal Labor and marginal coalition electorates, were to say to Labor, no, don't do this. This is a bad piece of legislation and it undermines our democracy. You'd expect that they might consider changing their position on this and voting it down.
I think one of the problems we have is that as a community we're pretty damn apathetic about most things. Are we going to be? Are enough people going to become motivated around this to effectively complain?
So this government over the last 8 years has had a very clear tactic when it comes to passing legislation, which is if it's something that undermines democracy, or if it's something that people aren't 100% going to be on board with, if it's something that's not going to be a vote winner for them, they'll pass it when there's a crisis. And so obviously COVID has presented heaps of opportunities for this government to just pass whatever they want. But they've got a real sweet spot moment here where they could pass almost anything, because we're dealing with lockdowns in Sydney and Melbourne. We're dealing with the end of the war in Afghanistan, the resulting explosion in the region there, which is a completely other issue entirely. We're dealing with a very complex situation in terms of the vaccine rollout. We're dealing with a very complex situation in terms of determining when Australians are going to move to beyond the current COVID situation. So everyone's distracted, everyone's busy, everyone's focused on survival. Now is not the time for people. People are not going to be paying attention to this. People are not going to be concerned about this.
Yeah, well, as I said, I don't think people necessarily are concerned about politics at most of the occasions until they have to walk into the polling booth. Yeah. But I think there is an opportunity, though, for us minor parties to make a big deal of it. Yeah, I think, absolutely. Whether it passes, well, it's likely to pass, but I think that there's a chance for us to fight the major political parties on just this one issue, that they are endeavouring to restrict the voices of parties such as ourselves, particularly ourselves, where we're kind of we're not just a one-issue party, but we are focusing on one particular aspect of the community, which is kids. That is restricting our voice federally. As Avery said, though, politically in South Australia, we're a registered party, and we plan to continue that registration throughout some other states as well over time. Yeah. But in terms of federal politics and their effort to silence us, that is a concern. That's a democratic concern.
Absolutely. This is an attack on our democracy. This is an attack on, it's not about the three of us even. This is an attack on the right of Australians to form and participate in political parties.
That's right.
The threshold that they've raised isn't just about contesting elections. Now, contesting elections is obviously super important. It's why we're all members of political parties. It's why we're all doing what we do. But there are so many other residual benefits to party registration, not relating to ballot access, that are being taken away here. If a minor party is deregistered, it loses its tax deduction status. So donations to that political party are no longer tax deductible. It loses access to things like the electoral roll. Minor parties have certain access to the electoral roll in order to ensure their membership list is clean, and also to contact voters about issues. That'll get taken away if you're if we're deregistered.
Do we, Avery? Could you tell us whether we still, as a state-based party, have access to all of that stuff that Corey was talking about?
Yeah, we still get access to the SA electoral roll through. It's a disc sent to me by the AEC once a month. I still get that. We still get the tax deductions because we're registered in South Australia, so donations to our SA account people can still deduct. The thing that I've never understood is we are a federal party. When we were a federal party, why couldn't we get the discs for the other states where we had people? That was one thing I never understood.
Bugbear of yours.
Yeah,
That's true. But I guess maybe. So how does this sit then, Corey? That we as a minor party, but with members in each state, why don't we just fight this from a state level?
there's the latest disc, Tony.
Beautiful, mate. That doesn't just. That looks like a piece of paper to me.
No, it's the latest disc from the AEC.
All right.
Received yesterday.
Good.
So in terms of how we can fight this, it's difficult at the state level because federal legislation is a federal matter, and this isn't the sort of bill that the states could rise up and overthrow, with short of rising up and overthrowing the federal government, which I don't think.
But doesn't it is a plan? Let's overthrow the bastards. But I guess the way I see it though is that as state, if we're able to get state members, so say all of us minor parties had at least one, we could band together. That would provide some influence, would it not?
So so I want to talk about the approaches that we're going to take as the progressives. I'd highly recommend that other parties consider taking these because these are going to work to some degree. So the first one is obviously we are focusing on trying to get our own federal membership up to 1,500 before the legislation takes effect. The minister, the Australian Assistant Minister for Electoral Matters, said that there'll be a 3-month window between royal assent and the bill actually, starting to affect existing parties. So we'll be looking to do that. We encourage all other minor parties to do that as well. Political diversity is a good thing. It's self-evident in its merits. Beyond that, the second thing we're going to do is we are going to have conversations with parties that aren't going to make it, because there are some political parties that unfortunately will not get to the 1,500 number, and we're going to have those conversations and say, hey, look, these are the areas we agree on, these are the areas we don't. Let's talk about working together. As you said, at the state level, that's going to be super important. We have, I said a little under 1,300 members across the country. We're only registered in the ACT. Every other state, we're not quite there yet. So at the state level, working with other minor parties, potentially setting up umbrella parties, which can serve as a registered party, but in actuality is a coalition between other parties. There's an example of that already on the electoral roll, which is the Climate Emergency Action Alliance. That's an alliance of smaller political parties who all agree on the issue of climate change. That is their number one issue, and that's what they were going to contest this election as. Unfortunately, obviously the threshold's been pulled up before they even could get onto the first rung of the ladder. But that's where they're at. So step one, build your membership. Step two, work with like-minded organisations. Build umbrella parties if you need to. The third option, and this is the one that is worth pursuing as well. And this will have to be done, through bilateral and multilateral relationships between political parties. Is potentially saying, okay, the differences between us are so small. Is it time to just fully join forces rather than have an umbrella organization set up a new major political party from the
we have actually we've been down this path, Avery, haven't we?
Twice.
Yeah, and it's like we have you look at us now, we're a very minor party. But we have 1,300 nationally. I mean, we could have a drive, I guess, and I suggest to anybody who's watching, join us or join the Australian Progressives too, for that matter. I won't leave you out of that, Corey. But this is our YouTube channel. Just remember that, folks. And we're happy to get on yours if you want.
We've got some content that we're working on at the moment.
So I guess what I'm thinking is, we could potentially have a drive and have 2,000 members, which gives us that then buffer. We've got to, and we know what the problem is. You've got to check all these people out, and you can't have old members sitting there because they've lost interest, and you've got to have sort of a current base. Is that right, Avery? Basically.
Yeah.
So we've learned all those lessons, but potentially we could get 1,500, which may not be as big a struggle for us as ABC Party that's just starting out with this, because we know it took us 5 years, I guess, to get there, and we know the struggles that are involved, and we're broke. I mean, we use, I don't know about you guys, you're probably wealthier than we are because you're progressives, but we struggle to be funded to do whatever it is that we do, simply mainly because kids are more, we've discovered at the last state election that people are more interested in the well-being of animals than they are in the well-being of children, apparently. So, which is a wee bit distressing. But I guess what I'm thinking, Corey, is that it's not impossible to get that 1,500 threshold. It just takes a lot more work. We're partway there, but lots of other parties wouldn't be because
we're 171 away, Tony.
Because but apart from that, it's the moral issue, Corey.
Yeah,
it's the fact that they're trying to limit the voices of people.
Yeah. So other than complying with the legislation, which if you want to contest the next federal election, you're going to have to. There's no other option here. Other than that, I mean, this is a bad piece of legislation being moved by a government that is on the run.
That says it all.
The moral issue here is they are trying to limit democracy. They're trying to limit the voices. It is a Putin-esque power grab by a major party cartel. And I copped some flack on Twitter as the party for using that term today. And I just want to
the Putin term.
No, the cartel.
Oh, the cartel. Well, any corrupt organisation is normally a cartel, mate.
Yeah. So this isn't just a buzzword or a term that's being chosen because it's a kick in the pants to them. Party cartel theory is actually a political theory which amounts to using the powers of the state to entrench your position in the political system. And that is exactly what this bill does. It's using the powers of the state, it's using the ability to rewrite the electoral legislation to lock in Liberal and Labor as the only parties that can use the terms Liberal and Labor and prevent emerging voices from being a part of the conversation.
I was just thinking, next though is stopping you using the word party. So
the bill's got a couple of caveats on there. So obviously you're allowed to use grouping words like party or alliance or whatever, and you're allowed to use the term Australian is protected. Anyone can use it. It's interesting that the term national is also protected. So the nationals don't get anything out of this. Maybe proprietary rights to protect the term country, but doubtful.
Yeah, I was interested in the what was it called? So this is Assistant Minister Morton, who I've never heard of, So I don't know how he's been assisting, but it hasn't been very productive because I've never heard of the idiot. So anyway, but in the bit he put out, it was. How when people state the same thing over and over again, you think this is the major thing. This is the thing that you wish you could hide, but you're choosing not to because you're talking about it all the time. You know what I mean? So, and that was, if the last paragraph there says, these provisions will enhance the integrity of the electoral process by reducing the likelihood of voters inadvertently associating or confusing political parties with similar sounding names. The three paragraphs before that, he said the same thing, but used different language. And I think this is what you want to hide. This
Yeah. Oh, look,
it says
you
it
know,
all.
second reading speeches on bills are always quite enlightening because, yeah, as you said, this is absolutely where they tell you what they really want without telling you what they want.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, this bill's primary target is parties with the term Liberal in their name. Its secondary target is a little sweetener to the Labor Party in that it'll probably kill the Democratic Labor Party from ever returning, or parties like the Progressive Labor Party ever being able to actually achieve
Or
registration,
the Conservative Liberal Party as well.
or the Conservative Liberal Party, or any party using those terms. And
Yeah.
the Greens will benefit because people won't be able to use the term Green in their party. Not that people really do try to, except for actually the Liberal Democrats. One of their previous names was Stop the Greens, so they wouldn't be able to do that anymore.
But would people, because
seek the permission of a party that's registered to use their name?
But if we're registered in South Australia as the Child Protection Party, which we are, does that mean then that no one could use anything that has child in it in another federally as well, because we're registered in the state?
So there's a lot of questions about the applicability of the bill in circumstances like that. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. I don't read legislation for a living, so it's not really for me to determine interpreting it. But there are questions there about what about parties that register at the state level?
Yeah.
What about parties that use terms that aren't quite common but are unique to them currently in the political space, like the Child Protection Party, like the Animal Justice Party? If some hunter wanted to start a political party called Kill the Animals, do they have to ask the Animal Justice Party's permission for the name animal?
Good. I like that. Yeah, good point. But does the federal legislation around this, to some extent, override the state legislation, though?
Where it conflicts, yes, but it doesn't really conflict because it is talking about federal elections, and the state governments don't have policies regarding federal elections.
No, but they do have the same policies in relationship to names.
They do, and we'll see what happens in terms of other states possibly following suit. I wouldn't be surprised if New South Wales passed a similar bill if they haven't already got that in their electoral act. Definitely,
you'll soon need 2,500 people in New South Wales to register the party.
That's it.
If they have anybody left in New South Wales once this blinking virus goes through. Yeah, you're in New South Wales, aren't you?
I'm in Sydney. Yeah,
you're in Sydney.
I'm in lockdown at the moment.
Yeah, I've got a son who's in Sydney too, so he's busily locked down. But he's a journalist, so it doesn't matter.
Hurry up and go nowhere.
Yeah. He's got a dog and a partner. I guess that keeps him entertained, and lots of friends on and internet. What they do? Hey, lockdown. What would it be like if it was lockdown without the internet? That would be terrible, wouldn't it?
Lockdown before 2010 even would have just been terrible.
Yeah, absolutely, because you wouldn't have been able to do things like this and stuff up Facebook pages. We've got to finish in a moment, so I'm just wondering, Avery, whether you have something that you would like to add to the stuff that we've been talking about.
No, one of the reasons I wanted to have Corey come along and talk to us is because of his depth of knowledge. Really appreciated listening to him. Can
I just say on that, Avery, Corey, you're a much smarter man than Avery and I are put together. So, we you got no idea how true that is. Yeah. So we appreciate it. We really do.
Yeah. So the main thing the biggest objection that I've got is because we're not federal and it doesn't really affect us, but I can see all of the state governments, all the territory governments jumping on that bandwagon and cranking up the number of members to register in a state. And the only reason for doing it, in my eyes, is to get rid of the minor parties. They're those little pests that keep taking votes away from the Liberals or the Labour Party or whatever.
Well, that's just it. 1 in 6 people at the last federal election voted for a minor party.
Yeah.
18% of Australians are now facing the real risk that their voice in their political system is silenced. They chose to put one in, Child Protection Party, Australian Progressives, Reason, some other political party, the Australian Workers' Party, they chose to support those parties at the last election. The federal government is now saying, okay, too many of you did that. We're not going to let you do it again.
Yeah. Corey, do you think we could have you back to talk politics? We could have and even if you get some other people that are progressives to come back and talk about it. I don't know. I guess you know a fair bit about American politics. Is that right?
Bit of fun, American.
How about in a few weeks' time we get back together, and we've got a page called Wise, Witty, and Weird. Check it out. I put a couple of posts up today about Sky News, which you might be interested in, and about Four Corners and having a go, and then the Australian putting out a response to Four Corners today. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's a lot of fun. And then Avery and I, we admire Donald Trump, don't we, Avery?
Oh, adore the man.
We're in awe. We're in awe of his
hero.
stupidity. We just don't know how a man could be so stupid and live to the age that he has. We just don't understand that. But
money can buy you so much life.
Yeah. But I think that would be don't you reckon, Avery? A fun conversation to have.
I think so. Yeah.
Corey, about progressives.
Absolutely. I'd be very keen to chat about that. My main area of interest and experience is in elections themselves. Bit of a personal plug. I've got an election themed blog and podcast coming out pretty soon.
All right. Let us know when. If you want us to promote it for you on our Facebook page,
I'll send around some links when it's ready. It's in a very early development stage. We have local council elections here in New South Wales in December, and I think I'm going to use that as sort of a soft launch.
All right. We've got we've got the Facebook page, the YouTube page, another YouTube page, our own YouTube pages, and I've got two podcasts, which is look up Conversations Over Coffee, everybody, with Dee and Tony. Fabulous listening, and also Kids That Matter. Yep.
And I keep saying I'm going to do my own YouTube channel, and I'm forever doing things for the Child Protection Party and the Riley Foundation. I'll never get anything done for myself.
Oh, Avery, I feel so sad for you. But
I know you do.
I do. I've shed a tear afterwards. But thanks, Corey. Really appreciate it, mate. Thanks for being here. And for those that are watching, we've had quite a few people on YouTube, actually. So, so thanks, everybody, for being here. And for those people that will be watching this on YouTube, we do suggest that it didn't come up. We do suggest that you subscribe and ring the bell. And those people watching on Facebook, just leave your comments below, and Avery and I will get to them at a later date. And if Corey cares to log on, he can make some comments as well. Thanks for being here, everybody. Take care, and thanks very much, Corey. Really appreciate it.
Too easy. See you later, guys.
See you guys. Bye.